House will please return to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. Chair recognizes the gentleman of the 7th, Delegate Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your conference committee on Senate Bill 596 will meet at 7 p.m. at the back of the Senate chambers, and the members of that are Delegate Phillips, Delegate Hartman, and myself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Clerk has the availability of a conference committee report.
Available in the clerk's office are conference committee reports on engrossed Senate bill for 317, authorizing 3 or more adjacent counties for multi-county trail network authority.
Are there further conference committee reports to announce? The gentleman of the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Your committee of conferees on Senate Bill 487 will meet at 7 o'clock in the President's conference room. Those members of the House are the gentleman from the 15th, Delegate Foster, the gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Lovejoy, and myself. Thank you.
Clerk has messages from the Senate.
The Senate has rejected the House amendments and requests the House to recede therefrom on committee substitute for Senate Bill 522, creating special road repair fund.
Message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill was to direct $110 million per year for 2 years into a special revenue subaccount in the State Road Fund to fund non-federal highway road repair. The House amendment removed the language that the monies be transferred, but agreed to the creation of a new special revenue account to be funded at the discretion of the legislature. The Senate refused to concur in the House amendment and requests the House to recede without offering any compromise language for the House's consideration. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House refuse to recede from its amendments and the Senate be requested to agree to the appointment of a committee of conferees of 3 of each members of the House on disagreeing votes of the 2 houses, and that the Speaker be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the House.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House refuse to recede from its position and that the Senate be requested to agree to a committee of conference on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses, and that the Speaker be authorized to appoint 3 conferees on behalf of the House. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares a motion adopted on this conference committee. The chair appoints the gentleman of the 10th, Delegate Chris, the gentleman of the 16th, Delegate Linville, and the gentleman of the 61st, Delegate Barrett. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2479, Corporate Governance Annual Disclosure Act.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2490, preventing, proposing, or enforcing rules that prevent recreational water facilities from making necessary upgrades.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed with amendment House Bill 2665, supplemental appropriation for PEIA rainy day fee.
Message to be received. Lady from the 32nd, Delegate Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a supplement to the PEIA Rainy Day Fund. The Senate amendment is a technical correction. It removed a code reference on page 2. The code section being referenced does not exist. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur in the Senate amendment.
The lady from the 32nd moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 2665. The gentleman from the 36th, Delegate Rowe.
If the lady would answer a question. Is this the rainy day? Is this the bill that created the rainy day fund, or is this just the supplemental to fund it?
No, this is a supplemental that puts the money into that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the motion? If not, the question before the House is the lady's motion that the House concur in the Senate amendments. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine. The clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2665.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read for the clerk will be enumerating the title of the bill. Lady from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill be made effective from passage.
Lady from the 32nd moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. 2/3 of the members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective for passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2673, creating the Oil and Gas Abandoned Well Plugging Fund.
Message will be received. Lady from the 32nd, Doug Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to reduce the severance tax on low-producing oil and gas wells and to add funding for plugging abandoned oil and gas, natural gas wells. The reduced 2.5% tax collected for low-producing wells will be used by the DEP to plug abandoned oil and gas wells through the use of the newly created Special Purpose Fund. The Senate amendment to the bill restructures the administration of tax collection. Rather than being collected by the DEP as a fee, the 2.5% will continue to be collected by the tax department as a reduced severance tax for low-volume wells. The use of the tax to plug abandoned wells was not changed by the amendment. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The lady from the 32nd moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to House Bill 2673. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. The gentleman 19th, Doug Thompson, your vote is not registered. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 90 ayes, 8 nays, 2 members absent, not voting. A majority of those members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2673.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2674, creating a student loan repayment program for a mental health provider.
Message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to create a student loan repayment program. The Senate amendment creates 2 programs to assist students in paying for higher education. The first program is to assist people who want to serve underserved areas in West Virginia by providing therapy and counseling services. The individuals who would qualify will be decided by legislative rule, but could be a psychologist, a clinical social worker, a licensed professional counselor, or a licensed marriage and family specialist. This program would repay up to $30,000 of an individual student loan. Payment is $10,000 per year per service. The second program, which was part of House Bill 2882, offers non-resident medical students a partial tuition waiver as a means of recruiting physicians to underserved areas in medical fields with practitioner shortages. It provides that 2 non-resident medical students from each medical school in the state are selected annually to participate in the program. These students will be charged the in-state resident tuition rate for each academic year they are enrolled in the program. These programs are administered by the HEPC, and the Higher Education Policy Commission is authorized to promulgate legislative rules to administer the programs, and this amends the title accordingly. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment and concur with the Senate title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments and title amendments to House Bill 2674. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 91 ayes, 2 nays, 7 members absent, not voting. A majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2674.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2770, Fairness in Cost Sharing Calculation Act.
Message will be received. Lady from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill seeks to create the Fairness and Cost Sharing Act by establishing cost sharing calculations. The Senate amendments change one definition, add an internal effective date, and make technical corrections. The amendments do not change the intent of the bill. The Senate also amended the title. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The lady from the 32nd moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to House Bill 2770. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting. A majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2770.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read, but the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 2856 relating to the administration of the operating fund of the Securities Division of the Auditor's Office.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2933, modifying the criminal penalties imposed on a parent, guardian, or custodian for child abuse resulting in injury.
Message to be received. Lady from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill provides much-needed changes to the penalties for abuse and neglect of a child, particularly in relation to repeat offenders. The Senate's amendments are purely technical. The Senate also amended the title. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur in Senate amendment and title amendment.
The motion by the lady from the 32nd is that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to House Bill 2933. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting. A majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2933.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read, but the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed without amendment Committee substitute for House Bill 2945 relating to vendors paying a single annual fee for a permit issued by local health department.
Message to be
The
received.
Senate has passed with amendment Committee substitute for House Bill 2947 relating generally to telemedicine prescription practice requirements and exceptions.
Message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill permits a physician who is practicing medicine through the use of telemedicine technologies to order a Schedule II drug to the hospital patient for immediate administration in the hospital. The Senate amendment prohibits this practice in an emergency department. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment to House Bill 2947. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting. A majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2947.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read, but the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment House Bill 2968, adding remote service unit to the definition of customer bank communications terminals.
Message to be received. Lady from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to also permit the installation and operation of what are known as remote service units by adding remote service units to the definition of customer bank communication terminal. The Senate amendment removes the requirement that remote service unit operators maintain a physical location in the state. Federal regulations preempt state geographic or operational restrictions on RSUs. Therefore, the House bill's requirement for banks to have a physical location in the state is prohibited. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with Senate amendment and concur with the Senate title amendment.
The lady from the 32nd moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments and title amendment to House Bill 2968. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting. Majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2968.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 3131 relating to providing salary adjustments to employees of the Department of Health and Human Resources.
Message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill was to exempt the Secretary of the Department of DHHR from certain Division of Personnel policies to hire additional personnel. The Senate amendment, though, removes the ability of the Secretary to set the salary ranges of his personnel and removes the expedited hiring process. However, the Senate did add in authority for the Secretary to create a special merit system for hiring of medical professionals at the state hospitals. The special merit system must be approved by the Division of Personnel no sooner than January. The hope is this change will enable the Secretary to provide higher wages to those healthcare professionals working at the state hospitals. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment and we concur with the Senate title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to House Bill 3131. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 76 ayes, 17 nays, 7 members absent not voting. Majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3131.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has adopted the conference report on and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 relating to crimes against public justice.
Message to be received. The Chairman of the 9th is recognized to present the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your conferees on the disagreeing votes of the two houses as to the amendments of the House to the committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 having met after full and free conference have agreed to recommend and do recommend to their respective houses as follows. That both houses recede from their respective positions as to the amendment of the House by adopting disagreed to conference committee report, which accomplishes the following. Senate Bill 295 as presented provided penalties for obstructing, interfering with, and attempting to disarm certain officers. Additionally, it conferred certain arrest powers on these officers. Finally, it made courthouse security officers law enforcement officers for purpose of the Federal Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act and gave them provisions to carry firearms if they meet certain training requirements. The bill included the state fire marshal, his assistant fire marshal, and deputy fire marshals and courthouse security officers into this definition of persons against whom obstructing an officer is a crime. The conference committee report adds corrections officers into this category. With regard to the arrest provisions, the conference committee report adds the words "or detention" to provide that obstructing officers in a lawful detention is a crime and adds correctional officers into this provision as well. Finally, the bill adds an effective date of July 1, 2020 for the provisions deeming courthouse security officers as law enforcement officers to give LEPs time to develop an education and training program sufficient to give those courthouse security officers without prior law enforcement training the needed skills to fully qualify as law enforcement officers. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the conference committee report. The gentleman in the 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Thank you. Would the gentleman from 9th yield? Thank you. Can you tell us what the training requirements are for the courthouse security officers?
Those training requirements are not set yet. That's why we moved the date to 2020 to give the Law Enforcement Professional Standards Office a time to create those standards, so it would be standards across statewide that they'd all be trained to.
Is this the bill that originally had a 1-week training requirement for courthouse security?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that, right now, as the bill stands, there's no training requirements at all. It just says there has to be training, but it's undefined.
The training is undefined, and it will not go in effect till 2020, that will give time for the training to take place.
And you're retired law enforcement,
Yes.
and you advocate the passage of this bill.
Yes, I do.
Then so do I. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the conference committee report? If not, then the question is on adoption of the conference committee report. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the conference committee report adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill. Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, 4 members absent not voting, a majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 295.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has refused to receive from its amendments and requests the appointment of a committee of conference of 3 from each house on the disagreeing votes on the 2 houses on Senate Bill, committee substitute for Senate Bill 405, increasing limit on additional expenses incurred in preparing notice lists for redemption. The Senate conferees are Senators Bozos, Seipolt, and Palumbo.
The message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 405 that we have discussed, the purpose of that bill was to increase the limit on additional expenses which may be recouped if property is redeemed. The Senate amendment struck the language that would have protected the purchase of the property at the tax sale. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House refuse to recede from its amendments and the Senate be requested to agree to the appointment of a committee of conference of 3 from each house on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses, and that the Speaker be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the House.
The question before the House is a motion by the lady from the 49th that the Speaker be authorized to appoint conferees for the conference committee on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses on Senate Bill 405. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. On this conference committee, the chair appoints the gentleman from the 28th, Delegate Pack, the gentleman from the 62nd, Delegate Bibby, and the gentleman from the 24th, Delegate Tomlin. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has amended the title on committee substitute for House Bill 2807, creating an additional modification to the West Virginia adjusted gross income of shareholders of corporations engaged in banking.
The message will be received. The gentleman from the 28th, Delegate Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee of conference on Senate Bill 405, Delegates Bibby, Tomlin, and myself will meet in the Senate President's Conference Room at 7:30 p.m.
The lady from the 49th, Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this, we are on committee substitute for House Bill 2807. The purpose of the bill is to provide the same tax exemption for persons, partners, and members of S corporations and limited liability companies engaged in state banking activities as is available to those engaged in banking activities as a C corporation. The amendments are technical cleanup in nature that were recommended by the Tax Division to make the exemption work, and a title amendment. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur in the Senate amendment and the title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to committee substitute for House Bill 2807. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? The gentleman from the 45th, Delegate Martin. If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, 4 members absent, not voting. A majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2807.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 424, Supplemental Appropriation to Civil Contingent Fund.
Message will be received. The lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we take the bill up for immediate consideration, dispense with the committee reference, and have it read a first time.
The lady from the 49th moves that Senate Bill 424 be taken up for immediate consideration, the committee reference be dispensed with, and the bill be read a first time. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Members are seeking recognition. For what purpose does the gentleman in the 32nd, Douglas Fast, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is this a rule suspension vote?
This is not a rule suspension vote. This is a majority vote. 51, a majority vote carries this particular question.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman in the 30th, Douglas Bates, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the request for the gentlelady just to further explanation to could you describe to me what the supplemental is, please? I didn't see it in the list of bills.
Yes, this is a supplemental appropriation to the Civil Contingency Fund, appropriating $10 million out of the Treasury in the state fund into the Governor's Office Civil Contingency Fund. When the governor declares a state of emergency, all payroll and disaster expenses for the National Guard mobilized are reimbursed by the governor's office. This money will be used to meet obligations from previous disasters, along with any future disasters that may occur.
And the lady's request is to take the bill up and have it read
Take it up for immediate consideration and have it read a first time.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman in the 60th, Douglas Wilson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady please yield?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I looked at the history of the bill. It looks like the Senate did a constitutional rule. They waived the constitutional rule so that they could take this up. Is that correct?
Yes, and we will do that on the second and third readings if this passes.
Yes, ma'am. Last minute appropriation, waive the constitutional rule. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House take up Senate Bill 424 for immediate consideration. Committee reference be dispensed with and the bill be read a first time. Is there objection to the lady's motion? If not, the clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 424, Supplemental Appropriation to Civil Contingent Fund.
Bill will be advanced to second reading. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the constitutional rules that bills be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with and the bill be taken up for a second and third time and put upon its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the constitutional rule requiring the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with, that the bill be read a second and third time and put upon its adoption. The gentleman from the 48th, Douglas Miley. The
Point of inquiry, are we suspending for all of these or just 424?
the latest motion was just for Senate Bill 424.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 30th, Douglas Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlelady, yield.
Yes.
Is it your intention, once this is dispensed with, to follow through with a request to suspend an additional time and to vote on its passage?
I did it in both motions, second and third time.
Second and third?
Yes.
Okay. And to the chair, this would require rule suspension?
This would require a 4/5 vote. This does require a 4/5 vote for adoption.
Thank you.
The question for the lady from the 51st, Douglas Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have never seen the second and third readings be suspended together in a motion. I don't think I've seen that before. We do? Okay. I have been corrected.
Are there other members who seek recognition? If not, the question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the constitutional rule requiring the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with, that the bill be read a second and third time and put up on its adoption. Those in favor of the lady's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 80 ayes, 16 nays, 4 members absent not voting, 4/5 of members present and voting having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the motion adopted. The clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 424.
Are there amendments? Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 424.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman is 64th. Delegate Householder is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 424 is a supplemental appropriation of $10 million out of the General Revenue Fund into the Governor's Office Civil Contingency Fund. I urge passage.
The question before the House is the motion, or the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Senate Bill 424. Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 69 ayes, 27 nays, 4 members absent not voting, majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 424.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 74 ayes, 21 nays, 5 members absent not voting, 2/3 of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 435, supplemental appropriate.
Clerk has the availability of a conference committee report.
Available in the clerk's office are copies of the conference committee report on Senate Bill 596, adjusting voluntary contribution amounts on certain DMV forms.
Are there further conference committee reports? Are there further messages from the Senate? Are there further messages from the Senate?
The Senate has agreed to the appointment of a committee of conference of the two houses on committee substitute for Senate Bill 487 relating to admissibility of healthcare staffing requirements in litigation. The Senate conferees are Senators Takubo, Poso, and Wolfle.
Message to be received.
The Senate has agreed to the appointment of a committee of conference of the two houses on Senate Bill 596, adjusting voluntary contribution amounts on certain DMV forms. The Senate conferees are Senators Weld, Seipolt, and Jeffries.
Message to be received.
The Senate has adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution 65, requesting study allowing retailers to pay sales tax for a consumer as means of advertising.
Message to be received. Resolution to be referred to the Committee on Rules. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move we recess until 9 p.m.
Lady from the 49th moves that, subject to announcements, the House stand in recess until 9 o'clock. Are there announcements? The gentleman from the 10th. Lady from the 49th is recognized. House will be in order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to withdraw my motion to recess until 9 o'clock and make a new motion to recess until 7:50 to receive committee conference reports.
Is there objection? Chair hears no objection. The question before the House is the lady's motion that the House stand in recess until 7:50. Are there announcements? Are there announcements? The gentleman from the 10th, Doug Kelly.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make some introductions.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today from Jackson Middle School in Vienna, we have a number of pages, and I think they just went inside. We have Caitlin Collins, Riley Hilling, Haley Durkins, Erica Hastley, and Zane Jackson are all pages from Jackson Middle School, and they're chaperoned today by mothers Mandy Hornbeck, Mallory Fields, Crystal Burchett. We also have two runners with us today, one from Jackson Middle School. That is Sean Conley, and he's here today with his grandfather, Roger Conley. And also we have Grace Peterson, and Grace is here with her mother and dad. And we'd all like to make them all feel welcome. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to introduce some of the folks that we have in the back of the room today. We've been here for 60 days. There's been a lot happen in those 60 days, and we have had the luxury of having individuals back there who kept our safety in check every minute that we were here. So at this time, I'd like to introduce those individuals in the back who have maintained our safety. We have Major Reggie Peterson, Captain Shaylin Oglesby, First Sergeant Jay Powers, Sergeant Sean Schoolcraft, Sergeant Dave Fry. We have Capital, for those ladies and gentlemen are all from the West Virginia State Police. We also have Capitol Police Director Kevin Foreman and Deputy Director Jack Chambers. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and make all these feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 10th, Doug Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the
continue with our list of pages from Jackson Middle School, my alma mater. Emily Bond, Emma Sasson, and Ian Sasson. Would you please stand? Would their parents stand and make them welcome? Thank you for having them.
The gentleman of the 10th, Doug Chris.
Yes, and I'd like to introduce a former delegate from Parkersburg, Rick Modison.
The lady from the 49th, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery tonight, I have my husband Rod and my daughter Sarah. If they would stand in the house, make them welcome.
The gentleman of the 21st, Doug Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to have 2 pages here from my district. These students are homeschooled, and their names are Colton Klein and Caitlin Klein, and they're escorted today by their mother, Dusty Klein. If you would, please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 66, Doug Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Note the presence of a former member and our state auditor, J.B. McCuskey, and one of his little ones. Will the House please make them welcome?
The gentleman of the 29th, Doug Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the gentleman from the 15th, we'd like to welcome his fiancee, Erica Hutchison. If she would rise and the House would stand up and give her a warm welcome.
The gentleman of the 59th, Doug Kump.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a few introductions. The first, if he would stand up, my grandson, Joel Phelps. And his parents, not related to me, Dana and Joel Phelps, his mother also is known as General Underpants. And I do want to make a personal note that when I was ill and in the hospital, she and another coworker who worked in the Berkeley County Library System went out of their way to transport my wife around and help when I was in the hospital. The others I'd like to introduce in the North Gallery is a lady by the name of Disco Donna. Would she please stand up? And another very special lady, my cousin-in-law, who's known as Footsie, Kathy Kraus. And when I was in the hospital and my wife was rushing down here from the Eastern Panhandle, she and her relatives in the Kanawha County area volunteered themselves to watch me so I wouldn't do anything dangerous while I was there by myself. Thank you.
The gentleman of the 14th, Doug Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 4 introductions. These folks are in the West Gallery, and if they'd stand as I introduce them, we have Jacob Hill. Jacob has pre-filed to run for the seat that I'm in right now. We have my lovely wife, Anna Maria. We have my daughter, Kayla. Not to be outdone by her brother, she's the class president of her freshman high school class at Point Pleasant High School. And then we have my son, Blaine, who we just recently learned has been accepted into the Naval Academy Preparatory School.
The gentleman of the 16th, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, if she'd please stand, my mother, Carla Linville. She's a saint. She puts up with me.
The gentleman of the 35th, Doug Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of your delegates from the 35th, Delegate Byrd, Scaff, Capito, and myself, we do have a page with us, Joshua Mills, today. If you wouldn't mind standing in the House, please welcome him. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 50th, Delegate Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have in the House a former member with us, the gentleman from Marshall County, the delegate from the 4th, our buddy Mike Farrow. Welcome back, Mike.
The gentleman from the 48th, Delegate Miley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to introduce the minority staff. I know many others in here earlier this evening and afternoon introduced their staffs as the hardest working and the coolest, etc. But we have the smartest working staff because they do so they do so much with so little. And I want to introduce them at this time. As I call your name, please raise your hand so everyone can know who you are and all the hard work you've done for us. Mariah Felty. Amanda Shelton. Emily Withrow. Vaughn Campbell. Butch Himes. Lacey Connolly. Kendra Amick. Emily Hanna. Jennifer McPherson. And Joe Altizer. Thank you all very much for your hard work.
The gentleman from the 30th, Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was my pleasure earlier this evening to meet a young lady. I embarrassed myself because I said, are you here to page? And in fact, I come to find out she's 18 years of age. Leah, if you could stand up. Leah Hu is up here, and this is her 19th year watching the last hours of the session. And Leah is the daughter of our parliamentarian and assistant clerk, Bo Hoover. So welcome, Leah.
The gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my friend from the 15th, we share a page tonight, Savannah Pizok. Savannah, if you'd stand up. She's here with her mother, my law school classmate, Michelle Pizok. Michelle, will you stand up? House, make them welcome.
The gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Behind me in the West Gallery is a really special woman that I consider myself to be remarkably lucky to be marrying this summer, my fiancée, Jamie Ames. If she would please stand, and if the House would please make her welcome.
The gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We actually have one more page from the 35th. So on behalf of Delegates Capito, Scaff, Nelson, and myself, we have Matthew Ayub from Charleston Catholic High School. Would you please stand and the House give him a welcome?
Are there further introductions? If not, the question before the House is the motion that the House stand in recess until 7:50 p.m. Those in favor will say aye. Any opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the House in recess until 7:50 p.m.